Welcome back. You're watching Today, and thanks for staying with us. And experts are warning that continued challenges in the accounting profession are becoming huge liabilities for companies. The industry is attracting fewer people and struggling to retain professionals. And that's according to Paul Emery, co-founder of accounting technology firm Makosi. He says that the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank is one example of accounting principle failures, but there is a solution. According to Emery, the profession can tackle its problems head-on by utilizing technology. Let's unpack that very notion with him now. A very good afternoon to you, Paul, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. Before we talk about the solutions to reignite the appetite for accounting and for people to join the profession, tell us about some of the big challenges that we've seen over the last 2 years. I think there's been a huge spotlight that's been shining on the profession since perhaps 2017, when we saw the collapse of Steinhoff as one example.
Correct. Yeah, look, there's been some challenges with the banking industry now for decades, and I think we're seeing the culmination of those events. And you touched on it earlier, that there are less people coming into the industry, and those that are sticking around for less and less time. But the big problem that causes is that the partner population, the people at the top of these firms, are getting older and older. So when you look at any capital allocation, it's going into retirement accounts. It's not going back into the businesses to help identify these kind of opportunities and risks and try and solve them. And so the industry is in a bit of a downward spiral. And unfortunately, it's not positioned in order to tackle some of these issues that we saw specifically with Silicon Valley Bank.
Yeah, and let's speak a little bit more about Silicon Valley Bank as an example of auditing and accounting failures. It was quite the disappointment to see what many would have thought was helping small and medium ventures operating in the US collapse the way that it did.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the first time that we've seen a US bank collapse, but it was the first time we saw a bank collapse at this speed. And I think that was what really startled everybody in the public, everybody in the regulators, and they started naturally looking for answers. And I think that there is a fantastic role that the public accounting industry can play. It's just not positioned in a way in order for it to be able to go and solve that right now. Because what happened with Silicon Valley Bank, essentially there was these very long dated instruments that were backed up with these very short-term deposits. And there was no requirement on an accounting level to do what they call mark to market, to price these on a regular basis. So if the value of those instruments goes down, you don't know about some of these potential landmines that you're sat on. And that's exactly what happened at Silicon Valley Bank. So when people started drawing out of their money, they didn't have the liquidity, they didn't have enough cash on hand in order to satisfy those withdrawals. And it created this situation that happened literally overnight. And I think that was what was just so startling. The accounting industry has a huge role to play in it. It's just, how do we go about that?
So that is the big question at the moment, and you've indicated that technology can play an important role in addressing some of the gaps that exist within the profession. Tell us exactly what it is you mean by the role of technology.
Awesome question. So technology definitely has a huge role to play in enabling a brighter future for the public accounting industry. But the first thing you must remember is that these are professional service firms. And think of it like a three-legged stool, and you can't have one without the other. And you need both technology, you need process, and you need people. And harkening back to the first point, with the less people that are available, it's really hard to making sure that you've got the right skill sets within the business to realize the potential of technologies that exist today. And then the processes just aren't there. They're just not robust enough in order to support the technologies. So in theory, there are technologies that could be used off the shelf today to solve some of these problems. But unfortunately, this problem with the workforce and the staffing and people leaving it in droves is creating a situation where they just can't maximize or even realize any of the potential of these types of technology.
Yeah, and that's a very concerning notion that you've put forward there, because you don't want to have a shortage of what many would say is such an important profession. So how do we then start to introduce different forms of technology to these firms? Because like you say, it hasn't been easy, and that's what's causing the exodus that you've just been talking about. Because ultimately, technology does attract younger people who are more tech savvy or prefer more digital methods of working and the like.
It's such a great point, and that's really what we've been trying to do here at Makosi is trying to find that room to grow at public accounting firms by deploying what we call kind of on-demand talent. So our technology platform enables us to be able to take people from South Africa and deploy them anywhere in the world. And so that enables firms to have the capacity that they need as and when they need it, but when they don't, that we can take them back, so it keeps those costs down. That's the kind of like the first part of it. And so finding that capacity is the first chapter. The second then is, okay, now what do we do with that capacity? And so we're spending a lot of time training people up in lots of different skill sets, whether that be large language models, data analytics, whatever it might be, in order to start to realize some of those technologies that we spoke about earlier.
No, thank you very much for those insights, Paul. That is Paul Emery joining us this afternoon, and he's the co-founder of accounting technology firm Makosi, just breaking down the challenges and, of course, ending off the conversation with some important solutions that really have technology and the incorporation of technology at the center of those solutions. Let's take you to KZN now, where businesses in the province